All right, let's talk now about the presidential campaign. No doubt what we see and hear could impact the economy. And from Twitter to Facebook to too many dozens of debates to count, this race is being covered ad nauseum. But are the candidates really being investigated? Or does the mainstream media simply pick and choose the best sound bites and replay them over and over? What happened to the media's responsibility to the public? To really get to the bottom of the candidates, to ask them the hard questions, and to dissect their answers. Not in 140 characters, but in a way that, calls them out when they're wrong and presses them on things that they're not clear about. Well, what can we expect from now until Election Day? To talk more about this, I'm joined by Christopher Chambers, journalism professor at Georgetown University. So what I want to do with you today, Chris, on this lovely Friday, let's pick a couple of examples by these lovely men who have been keeping us entertained for the last few months.
And women until she dropped out.
Yeah, no more Bachman. She's out. So let's start first with Rick Santorum over the weekend on Meet the Press.
I would be saying to the Iranians, you either open up those facilities, you begin to dismantle them and make them available to inspectors, or we will degrade those facilities through airstrikes and make it very public that we are doing that. The president has done.
So you would lay out a red line, and if they passed it, airstrikes by President Santorum.
Iran will not get a nuclear weapon under my watch.
All right, here is Rick Santorum singing his old song about bombing Iran and all that kind of stuff. And he's talking about the nuclear facilities being investigated. Now, NBC's David Gregory knows that Iran's nuclear facilities are already under the inspection of the IAEA, but he didn't correct him. Why not?
Well, you have to understand that this is 4 years ago during the 2008 campaign, I came up with this theory about kind of the sports sort of model of coverage and 24-hour news cycle, and that's been tracked later this week by Pat Hurdy in The Atlantic. He's talking about ESPN. It's the ESPNization of news. And, part and parcel of that, because it fits the economic model, you don't have to put a lot of, investment in investigative reporting. It can be all entertainment, is that you go for the visceral, you go for the stupid. You highlight the stuff that will keep somebody from taking that remote and going somewhere else. You don't get that by correcting a candidate who's either dwelling in the murk of a very complicated issue or out and out lying. I mean, this is one example where he's basically crossed the line from murk to lying. There have been numerous situations in the Republican debates from months ago until very recently, where, you mentioned it when you were introing. I mean, how many debates have there been, and not by Fox News, by news outlets which are supposedly hostile to the Republican candidates, and they've just let them talk. And let them say just some of the most outrageous things, not just in the murk, but bordering on lies. It's because you need to engage that audience and then pull them into that. You don't want to be the person that, you don't want to be the old Siskel and Ebert and spoil the plot. You want to push it along.
I think you said a couple of things, Chris, that really stick out in my mind. Number one, it is very expensive to pay reporters, to pay journalists to actually do investigative work. It's not something that can be done in one day or 1 week. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of phone calls. It takes digging in dirt and knocking on doors and still paying that person to do it. And that's why we see that so less. And I think that's interesting. I hadn't heard that the ESPNization, it does seem that a lot of sports, journalists that I know kind of are buddy-buddy with the athletes.
Well, that's one aspect of it. It's the buddy aspect of it. It's the not drilling down into the deeper stories aspect of it. It's taking the sensationalistic stories, say Penn State, and simplifying them and not really drilling down. So you take that and you move it to the political field. It's a perfect fit. It's a perfect slide. And there you can really develop the whole pundit sort of situation where you have 6 or 7 people arguing. Well, that's a sports model,
and it doesn't even matter so much what they say as how they say it. If they say something that's going to generate discussion, that's all that matters.
Exactly. And Matt Taibbi said at Rolling Stone, it doesn't matter what you say, it's how you say it, what your CUME score is, and how you can connect to that target demographic. And that's what's going on here. You don't get that by interrupting people. They don't want people to be eggheads or annoying. The ironic thing is that Meet the Press itself, 40, 50 years ago, when a guy named Lawrence Spivak was the first host, he used to interrupt people all the time. Or he would give them let's take this scenario. And if something seemed a little off kilter because he did his research, he would call them on it. That changed when Tim Russert took over.
Well,
and then it became a buddy-buddy.
Well, yeah, sometimes, but I think Russert had a couple
sometimes.
examples. Anyways, moving on from Meet the Press, let's take a look at another interesting example. This is Mitt Romney, the other current frontrunner, and something he said the other day that he also wasn't really called out on.
Corporations are people, my friend. We can raise taxes on, of course they are. Everything corporations earn ultimately goes to people. So, where do you think it goes?
What? I mean, at least the people in the audience were calling him out and laughing at him.
Well, it goes to some people like, him.
Right, exactly. So that, I mean, this is just another example of,
right.
So what's going to change, or what are we going to see? Are we just going to continue to see this for the next 8-9 months?
I think we are. I mean, because even when you have an outfit like PolitiFact or other mainstream media-directed organizations, I mean, even the outlets themselves, of the three networks and then the cable giants, coming back later and say, well, this is what so-and-so said in this debate, or this is what so-and-so said in this speech, and picking it apart. They don't, it's not at the point of contact. A lot of this stuff takes place in debates, right there at press conferences, and nobody presses them on it. What they try to do is separate that out so you'll go to their website, or so you'll listen to the pundits that night argue about it, but there's no depth. And you compound that with the fact that they've got embedded journalists with these people, which is nothing new. There were people following Abraham Lincoln around from Harper's Weekly. The difference is that these people actually tried to dig up not only the substantive stories, but the human interest stories. So, like, what is it like to be a candidate? What's that like on your family? They don't do that anymore, again, because they want the kind of superficiality, the quick news, because, fast information's a commodity. So if they can break the gossip, not the policy issues, not the investigative stuff, not checking and fact-checking on what these people are doing, then they've served their purpose. And then the networks can say, oh, we've got somebody embedded with Mitt Romney. It's kind of a keep up with the Joneses kind of a thing. They're not doing anything. They're just following him around and reporting.
And showing what he says, as opposed to actually pressing him on things. I know I saw a funny quote the other day on Bloomberg. It said, in the restaurant or with cantaloupes, you're probably looking for the best among a variety of appealing options. However, at the caucuses or in the voting booth, you're probably seeking the least objectionable among a group of undesirables. I think that's a really well put way to say it. I mean, with what's going on with our system. Sadly, Chris, we're out of time.
Sure.
Always fun to have you here, especially at the end of the week, to round things out.
Thank you.
Christopher Chambers, journalism professor at Georgetown University.